to try and debate whether or not a 20% capital gains tax would be a win or actually a punishment for investors. So I've got two sides with me here to hash it out. Scott Hodge, President of the Tax Foundation, and Bob McIntyre, Director of Citizens for Tax Justice. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Scott, you believe that 20% would be too high for capital gains?
It certainly would. In fact, the administration has already increased the effective tax rate on capital gains and dividends when they enacted the health care bill, which included a 3.8% tax on high-income earners for non-salaried income, such as capital gains and dividends. So this increase that they're talking about would be on top of that and would push the top rate on capital gains to about 24%. And so we would be sending a signal to the rest of the world that the U.S. is a bad place to do business.
It seems to me that everybody in this country should be chipping in to help support the government through taxes. And why do we say people who are making their money by gambling in Wall Street should pay half the rate that everybody else pays? That's not fair, and it doesn't make economic sense either.
But what about Scott's argument that it will actually result in the U.S. becoming a less attractive place for people to invest in and do business in, and potentially people might actually invest less in the stock market as well?
Well, there's this myth that the economists put out that we have high taxes on capital in this country, and it's completely false. In fact, there are so many loopholes and so many tax shelters that we barely tax capital income at all. And President Obama, by proposing a 20% rate on capital gains, much lower than Ronald Reagan wanted, by the way, is just saying enough is enough. We can at least tax them at half the rate of everybody else rather than only a third of the rate of everybody else.
Yes, Scott, what do you think about Bob's argument that we should all help out with taxes, we should all help to reduce the deficit? Would it significantly help reduce the deficit?
The deficit is a spending problem. It's not a tax revenue problem. If we were to tax 100% of the capital gains income of those earning over $200,000 a year, we'd raise about $700 billion this year, which would be about half of the federal deficit. So even those sort of punitive, punishing taxes would not do enough to reduce the national deficit. It's a spending problem. It has to be addressed on the spending side only.
Bob, what about dividends? Because dividends, it looks like, are going to remain at 20%. Do you think they should go back to the 39.6?
I think they should be taxed just like other income, yes. I mean, why, when you're a wage earner, do you pay the income tax and the payroll tax on everything you make, and if you make your money from money, then all of a sudden you get a special break and don't even pay the payroll tax on it either? I mean, it's just it's a crazy system we have now, and it certainly hasn't been that way over the years. We used to have a higher tax on investment income and a lower tax on wages on the theory that it was harder to go to work than to sit around and watch your stock portfolio grow. But these days, people think that the problem of America, if I get Scott right, he thinks is that the rich don't have enough money and the rest of us have too much.
Well, Bob, that's all rhetoric. In fact, even rhetoric. We have one of the highest tax rates on dividends in the world because, as you know, the dividend tax is a double tax. It's on top
of the
corporate tax,
Scott.
All we need to do is look at what's going on in Great Britain, which just last week increased their capital gains rate from 18% to 28%, and they're worried about capital flight to countries like Switzerland, Hong Kong, or Netherlands, which don't have a capital gains tax.
Bob, you just got 10 seconds to reply, and then we've got to wrap it up.
We don't have a double tax on capital in this country. In fact, corporations don't pay much, and almost all the dividends are tax exempt for people. So raising taxes a little bit on capital is just a small step in the right direction.
Okay, great debate, folks. Thanks very much for joining us.